You know, when you look at a towering, like, 100-story skyscraper,
Oh, yeah.
all that gleaming glass and steel reaching into the clouds, it's so easy to just marvel at the finished product.
Right, you don't really think about how it started.
Exactly. But before a single shovel hits the dirt, someone had to stand on an empty lot holding a completely blank piece of paper.
Which is pretty terrifying if you think about it.
Oh, incredibly terrifying. And they didn't just have to sketch a beautiful, inspiring vision for that building. I mean, they had to mathematically prove to a room full of highly skeptical investors that their hypothetical tower wasn't going to, just collapse in a stiff breeze.
Right, because having a grand vision in your head is one thing, but documenting the load-bearing capacities of every single support beam so convincingly that someone actually writes you a multi-million-dollar check.
Yeah, that's a whole different ballgame.
It really is. It requires an entirely different level of rigorous, methodical communication. It's the ultimate test of high-stakes persuasion.
And that transition from a brilliant abstract idea in your head to a fully funded real-world project, that is exactly what we are decoding in today's deep dive.
So glad we're getting into this today.
Same. We are breaking down a masterclass in structured persuasion from the YouTube channel Metabolism Made Easy. Specifically, we're analyzing their instructional breakdown on creating and organizing a grant proposal.
And honestly, a grant proposal is the modern equivalent of that blank piece of paper.
It really is. So our mission today is to take what is normally a terrifyingly massive, overwhelming undertaking and transform it into a clear 6-step blueprint for you.
Because whether you are actively trying to get a scientific project funded or prepping for a major corporate pitch.
Or even if you're just fascinated by the hidden mechanics of how complex ideas get the green light.
Exactly. Understanding this anatomy is going to change how you pitch your own ideas. The framework used to convince a panel of elite scientists to part with their research budget relies on the exact same psychological triggers you need to convince a board of directors.
Or a venture capitalist, or, even your own boss.
Right. It's really all about systematically removing doubt from the mind of your audience.
Okay, so let's get right into how you actually remove that doubt, starting with what the instructor calls the money page.
Ah, the money page.
You're right. This is the very first section of the grant, officially known as the specific aims. And right off the bat, the video makes it abundantly clear that this is the absolute most important part of the entire document.
Without a doubt. If you lose them here, it's over.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I'm looking at the rules for this section, and they are incredibly draconian. It has to be exactly 1 page.
1 page, no exception.
Right, like not a page and a half, not 2 pages, exactly 1. Why is this single piece of paper so disproportionately critical when the rest of the proposal might be like 50 pages long?
Well, you really have to put yourself in the shoes of the reviewer. These are experts who are staring down a massive, intimidating stack of incredibly dense proposals.
They've probably been reading all weekend.
Exactly. They are fatigued. They have limited time. If your very first page isn't crystal clear about exactly what you intend to achieve, they are going to carry that cognitive friction right into the rest of the document.
Oh, that makes sense. It's like you're setting the mood for the whole read.
Precisely. The 1-page constraint forces you to distill your entire universe of research into its absolute most potent essence. You are essentially buying their attention for the next 49 pages.
Wow. So you're earning the right to be read.
Right. If the specific aims are muddled, they read the rest of the grant looking for reasons to reject it. But if that 1 page is brilliant and tight, they read the rest looking for reasons to approve it.
And it's not just a summary of what you want to do either. The instructor points out that these 1 to 3 specific aims should be framed as very specific, concise questions.
Yes, the framing is crucial here.
Like you're posing the exact scientific mysteries you intend to solve.
Right. Exactly. Because a statement says, I am going to study this protein. But a question asks, does this specific protein trigger this exact cellular response under these conditions?
Oh, I see. A question instantly creates a narrative loop in the reviewer's mind.
It does. It creates a gap in their knowledge that they suddenly want you to fill.
Okay, so you've hooked them. You've asked a brilliant question on the money page and created that narrative loop. But reviewers aren't going to care about your question if they don't believe you actually understand the history of the problem, right?
Right. You can't just drop a question out of thin air.
So how do you prove that your question actually matters?
Well, that is where you transition into the second section, establishing the background and significance. Basically, you have to map the territory before you can claim the way forward.
Makes sense. So you provide a survey of the most recent relevant literature.
You do. But, and this is important, this is a common trap for early researchers. They treat this section like a high school book report.
Oh, yeah, like just a laundry list of facts. This guy did this and that guy did that.
Exactly what you want to avoid. Instead, you need to actively synthesize that literature to establish the boundary of current human knowledge. You're pointing out exactly where the map ends.
And then I guess you explain how your specific aims are the necessary expedition into the unknown.
Exactly. You have to explicitly show how your work will increase the knowledge base or lead to entirely new applications.
The video actually mentions a really specific tactic for finishing this background section, which I loved. They suggest proposing a summary or a model.
Yes. Synthesizing a model does immense heavy lifting for your credibility.
Right, because instead of just trailing off, you build a cohesive framework out of all that history.
It proves you aren't just memorizing data points. It shows you're seeing the underlying matrix of the science. You're taking conflicting or disparate pieces of previous literature and snapping them together into a unified theory.
And that sets the perfect stage for your actual experiments.
It really does.
Okay, so you've got the brilliant question, and you've proved you understand the history. You've painted this beautiful picture of the skyscraper and explained why the city desperately needs it.
But you still need the money.
Right. You can't just promise the moon and expect a check. You have to prove you have the tools to actually build it, which pivots us from the vision directly into the competence.
And competence is the currency of trust. You can have a Nobel-worthy hypothesis, but if the reviewers don't believe you can physically execute the experiments, you won't get a dime.
Which brings us to the third section, preliminary studies. And this part really stood out to me. The breakdown insists that this section must contain pertinent data from your very own lab.
Yes, highly crucial.
You need to use your own tables, your own graphs, your own figures. But why the strict emphasis on your own lab? I mean, if a technique is standard in the industry, can't you just point to a famous paper and say, hey, we'll just do what they did?
Well, consider the difference between reading a recipe for a complex French pastry and actually successfully baking it yourself. Reviewers know that scientific techniques are notoriously finicky. Getting a complex assay to work requires institutional knowledge, calibrated equipment, and practiced hands.
Oh, I see. So by demanding preliminary data from your own lab, they are asking for tangible proof.
Exactly. They want proof that you have this technique currently up and running on your lab bench, producing reliable, verifiable data. It completely de-risks the investment for them.
It's literally a difference between, I know how this works in theory, and here are the receipts showing I did it yesterday.
Perfect way to put it. And you should also include any recent publications or even manuscripts you're currently preparing.
Just to show that your lab has a track record of actually crossing the finish line?
Right. It creates this halo effect of reliability around your entire pitch.
So you've proved you have the tools. Now you have to lay out the exact blueprint for using them. Section 4, the experimental design.
And the instructor argues this is the second most important part of the grant, right behind the money page.
And organization here is everything, right? You have to map it sequentially. Aim 1 connects to experiment 1. Aim 2 connects to experiment 2.
It's a straight, unbreakable line. It has to be. This section is the engine of the proposal.
So for every single experiment, you need a detailed rationale, the physical design, and the anticipated results.
Right, because if the reviewer gets lost in the weeds here, the entire structure just collapses.
But here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit counterintuitive to me.
Oh, how so?
Well, the breakdown explicitly states that for every experiment, you must include alternative strategies.
Yes.
You have to outline exactly what you will do if your proposed experimental design does not yield any meaningful results. And it made me think it's like having to bring a spare tire to a car race just to prove you're a good driver.
That's a great analogy.
Right. Because in almost any corporate pitch I've ever seen, if you stand up and start talking at length about how your grand idea might completely fail, you get laughed out of the room. Why do you have to actively plan for your own scientific failure in order to get funded? Doesn't a plan B imply you aren't confident in plan A?
It is a brilliant paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
But think of it less like showing weakness and more like a grandmaster playing chess.
Okay, a grandmaster.
If you move your knight, assuming your opponent will do exactly what you want, you are a novice. A grandmaster anticipates that their primary strategy might be blocked, and they already have a tactical pivot mapped out.
And in science, your opponent is the profound unpredictability of nature.
Precisely. Nature doesn't care about your 6-month plan.
Yeah.
If you already knew with 100% certainty that the experiment would work exactly as hypothesized, it wouldn't be research.
It would just be a demonstration.
Exactly. Reviewers know experiments fail all the time. So by requiring alternative strategies, they are testing your scientific maturity.
They want to know if you'll panic when things go wrong.
They're asking, are you dogmatic and rigidly married to one fragile method, or are you a dynamic problem solver who has already anticipated the roadblocks? A brilliant plan that shatters the moment a single variable changes is a terrible financial investment.
Wow. Showing you have a tactical pivot proves you understand the board, not just the pieces. I love that.
It's essential.
Okay, so you've got the money page, you've proved your lab is capable, and you've laid out a foolproof and fail-proof experimental design. The heavy lifting feels like it should be over.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
But a brilliant plan can be instantly derailed if the mechanics of your presentation make you look untrustworthy.
The polish is just as important as the structure. Let's look at the final sections, literature cited and the appendices.
Now, obviously, citing your sources is standard practice, but the video implies it's not just about avoiding plagiarism, right?
Not at all. As we discussed with the background section, your citations serve as a geographical map of the scientific frontier. When reviewers look at your literature cited, they are checking your awareness.
Seeing if you're drawing from the most robust, recent, and relevant wells of knowledge.
Exactly. If your citations are outdated, or you're missing key foundational papers in your field, it signals that you are operating in a bubble. It shows you're disconnected from the realities of modern research.
And speaking of operating in a bubble, that brings us to the appendices. This is normally where you house the bulky stuff, right? Long protocols, equipment lists, things that would clog up the main narrative.
Right, but the video highlights one specific inclusion here that is absolutely vital: letters of collaboration.
Yeah, this was interesting because it raises a big question for any researcher building a massive project. What happens if your specific aims require a highly specialized technique that your lab simply does not possess?
Well, you can't just fake the preliminary data.
Exactly. And you shouldn't abandon a brilliant question just because you lack one specific tool.
So the letters of collaboration are the strategic answer. By including formal letters from outside experts who have agreed to lend their skills or equipment to your project, you are demonstrating network leverage.
You're showing the reviewers that you possess the self-awareness to identify the gaps in your own capabilities.
And the social capital within the scientific community to actually fill those gaps.
It proves you aren't trying to do everything in a vacuum. It's a massive signal of maturity.
Absolutely.
So those are the core structural components. But Metabolism Made Easy makes it incredibly clear that just slamming these pieces into a PDF does not mean you have a grant. The linkage and editing phase is a monumental undertaking.
Oh, it really is. They actually recommend dedicating 3 to 6 months of preparation time for this entire process.
3 to 6 months. Let that sink in. That timeline illustrates the sheer cognitive load required to produce a document of this caliber.
A huge portion of that time is dedicated to ensuring continuity. These sections cannot read like they were written in isolation on different days.
Right, you have to weave them together so tightly that a sentence in the experimental design explicitly echoes the terminology used in the specific aims.
Which in turn references the model built in the background section. It has to feel like a single, unbreakable chain of logic where every single sentence holds structural weight.
And once that chain is forged, you enter the gauntlet of editing. You need a critical read by a trusted colleague, someone who isn't afraid to hurt your feelings, to hunt for structural knowledge gaps you've become blind to.
And then a fine-tooth combing of the entire document for typos, incorrect citations, and formatting errors.
And this brings up a point where I really want to push back a little.
Go ahead.
So what does this all mean? The instructor drops a really blunt warning that caught my eye. They say, a sloppy or careless grant proposal indicates a sloppy or careless performance of the research in the lab.
That's sloppy rule.
Yeah. Is a typo really a proxy for bad science? I mean, if I am a brilliant researcher, but I accidentally misspell the word centrifuge at 2 in the morning after 6 months of drafting, does that really mean my actual lab work is inherently flawed?
It does feel a little dramatic, doesn't it?
It really does. To equate a Word document error with scientific incompetence.
I get that. It feels harsh on the surface. But if we connect this to the day-to-day reality of the scientific method, attention to detail is quite literally the only thing keeping the whole enterprise from collapsing.
Okay, how so?
Well, in a laboratory environment, a misplaced decimal point in a dosage calculation, A slightly mislabeled test tube or carelessly calibrated piece of equipment doesn't just mean a typo. It can invalidate years of expensive work.
Or in clinical trials, it can actively endanger lives.
Precisely. And the reviewers cannot visit your lab to watch you pipette liquids or calibrate scales. They only have the document in front of them as a proxy for your meticulousness.
Oh, wow. I see where this is going.
If you cannot maintain rigorous control over the variables in a 50-page Word document when you had 6 months to do it, why on earth should they trust you to maintain rigorous control over the variables in a complex, multi-year, million-dollar scientific study?
Okay, when you frame it as a proxy for controlling variables, it makes perfect sense.
In this context, the medium really is the message. Sloppiness in the pitch signals an unacceptable level of risk to the investor.
A typo isn't just bad grammar, it's a red flag about your baseline level of operational rigor.
Exactly.
So, let's play this out. You've spent 6 grueling months. You've got the perfect money page, ironclad preliminary data proving your competence, brilliant alternative strategies, letters of collaboration showing your network, and you've combed through every single comma so there isn't a hint of a typo.
You've done everything right.
You submit this flawless, intricately linked blueprint. You wait. And yet, after all of that flawless execution, the instructional breakdown tells us you still have to mentally prepare for the most statistically likely outcome.
Which is complete failure.
Complete failure. Which is just brutal to hear after laying out a half-year timeline.
It is a sobering reality check. But the statistics dictate that there is a very high likelihood your first attempt at funding will not be successful, no matter how brilliantly it was constructed.
And this transitions the video from the pure mechanics of writing the grant to the deeply necessary psychology required to actually survive as a researcher. They introduce what they call the 3 R's.
Rejection, revision, and resubmission.
Right, the 3 R's.
They represent a cycle that almost every world-class scientist knows intimately. The difference between a failed researcher and a funded one is how they handle that initial rejection.
And the video provides a very specific roadmap here. You don't just take your ball and go home. You take the critiques provided by the review panel and you address them head on.
Yes, but it's not just about tweaking a few sentences to appease them.
Right. The breakdown highlights that you need to include new additional information that was not present in your original proposal to further support your hypothesis.
And that is the defining factor of a successful resubmission. It proves that the rejection actually spurred you to return to the lab, gather more evidence, and strengthen your foundation.
It's like you're showing them you did your homework.
Better than that, it shows you've entered into a collaborative scientific dialogue with the reviewers. You aren't just shouting a pitch into the void anymore. This vastly enhances the probability of being funded on the second or third attempt.
The breakdown concludes with a checklist for this ultimate success. They say you need a clear proposal, a sound plan, a methodical approach, adequate resources, and this is the phrase that really stuck out to me, the flexibility to change the plan as needed to address your specific aims.
Flexibility is key.
And honestly, this is where the emotional tension of this whole process really hits me.
How do you mean?
Well, we just spent this entire deep dive talking about spending half a year building a rigidly structured, intricately linked, highly sequential blueprint where every sentence relies on the previous one.
Right.
How does a human being maintain the flexibility to change their plan when they've just spent 6 months building something so solid, only to have a panel of anonymous reviewers poke holes in it? The ego blow must be massive. How do you stay flexible when your masterpiece gets torn apart?
What's fascinating here is that the flexibility they are demanding is the core philosophy of science.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Think about it. The scientific method is entirely predicated on adapting your worldview when presented with new, valid data. In this scenario, the reviewer's critiques are the new data.
That's a huge perspective shift.
If you are so emotionally attached to your original 6-month draft that you refuse to alter it, you are prioritizing your own ego over the objective pursuit of the truth.
You're protecting the document instead of protecting the science.
Exactly. The flexibility to look at your blueprint, acknowledge a structural weakness pointed out by a reviewer, tear down that section, and rebuild it stronger. That is the ultimate proof that you possess the temperament of a true investigator.
You have to view the review panel not as adversaries trying to destroy your building, but as senior engineers pointing out a microscopic crack in the foundation before you pour the concrete.
The revision process is inherently collaborative, even if the rejection stings in the moment.
I love that. So, to wrap this all up for you listening, we have traced the complete anatomy of structured persuasion today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We started with the immense outsized power of the money page, that single sheet where your specific aims must hook the fatigued reader by posing a compelling mystery.
And we explored the necessity of bridging the gap between your grand vision and your actual competence through preliminary data from your own lab.
We looked at how alternative strategies aren't a weakness, like the spare tire analogy, but a chess master's proof of scientific maturity. And we discussed the intense 3 to 6 month timeline required to link these sections flawlessly.
Ensuring that a single careless typo doesn't inadvertently signal a sloppy, dangerous lab environment.
And perhaps most importantly, we navigated the psychological reality of the 3 Rs. The expectation that your initial attempt will likely meet rejection, and that true success requires the resilience to revise, gather new data, and engage in a dialogue through resubmission.
These are not just rules for academic science.
Not at all.
The underlying principles, planning for failure, mathematically proving your track record, and iterating relentlessly through rejection, they apply to almost any major professional pitch or high-stakes proposal you will ever make in your career.
It really is a universal blueprint for building trust. And that leaves us with one final thought to ponder today, building right off that focus on rejection and revision.
Oh, I'm curious where you're going with this.
Well, we naturally tend to view a rejected proposal as a massive roadblock, right? A frustrating, agonizing delay holding up the real work we want to do.
That's certainly how it feels.
But if a rejected proposal practically forces you to address your own blind spots, pushes you back into the lab to gather brand new information, and makes you develop even stronger alternative strategies before you are allowed to resubmit, could the painful failure of a first submission actually be the very mechanism that guarantees the final research is successful?
Oh, wow. That is a fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah. Maybe rejection isn't a roadblock in the grant process at all. Maybe that brutal storm of critique tearing at your meticulously crafted blueprint isn't a delay in the construction process.
You're saying it's a built-in feature of good science.
Exactly. Maybe, in the end, the storm is the only thing that ensures the building will actually stand.
Because if you never encounter a rejection that forces you to revise your blueprint, did you ever really push the boundaries of what you thought was possible?
Something to think about the next time you are staring down an empty lot holding a blank piece of paper. Thanks for joining us on today's deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.